Well, welcome everybody. This is Harry Webney-Behrman. I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, and I'm really pleased to welcome all of you to this webinar on communities of practice and how they can serve us in focusing on what matters at work. I work as a mediator and consultant and facilitator here in Ottawa, and I'm really glad to partner with my friend Darren Ike, who's in Madison, Wisconsin. Darren?
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Harry. Yeah. Like you said, here in Madison, Wisconsin, and know Harry from a number of years back through the university and connecting through a community of practice called Maniac that we'll share the story with. And that was a number of years ago. So this kind of thing lives on for me, and happy to reconnect with Harry to collaborate and put this on today. But, you know, my organization, Innovation Learning, we have things like innovationtraining.org, if you've seen that site, or universitywebinars.org, and do a lot of design thinking workshops and teaching people how to design and facilitate their own programs and workshop, especially for the purpose of innovation. And what a time where we need innovation now in our world, right? New ideas and new ways. So that's a little bit about me. And Harry, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, so what we are hoping to be able to do today is give you a sense of how communities of practice can serve us in these particular times that we're facing. And as we get started, I just want to acknowledge that on this date here in Canada, we've had nearly 87,000 cases of COVID-19 and nearly 7,000 people have passed away. And in the United States, 1.7 million cases and 100,000 people have died. And then around the world, millions of people are being affected. So we are all living in very unusual times and very important times. And to have a workshop like this at this time is something that for us is acknowledging that we're working in different kinds of ways. And so we think communities of practice, while they've always had resonance for me and for many of us, are especially important for us to think about in different kinds of ways at this time. So we'll do a brief overview of what communities of practice are, how they're designed in order to be successful. Then we'll actually be doing it. We'll engage in a couple of activities that do a rapid prototyping of a COP among us. Then relate it to the book that I published a couple of months ago, What Matters at Work, and the work that I've been focusing on in teaching about it, and how communities of practice can particularly serve us in addressing some of the challenges outlined there. And again, we'll be doing a couple more activities that will give us an opportunity to get a flavor for how COPs can support us in that effort. And along the way, hopefully we'll come up with some really great ideas that you'll all be contributing and suggestions that will emerge from that regarding how we can continue our learning.
Great. Yeah, Harry, experiential experience today is what we're planning. Not your usual webinar where you just sit and watch somebody present for a full hour, or maybe do a poll here and there, but we'll wind that down and get into our first breakout. But here's some of the learning outcomes, Harry.
Yeah, so we want to fully understand how communities of practice offer value and their potential to your organization, wherever you may be. Experience some of that learning in service to your priorities. Understand how those COPs may be used in service to the things that really matter, so that we can align our values, intentions, resources, and actions, and then connect with one another. So that way we'll be able to share expertise and resources around communities of practice. Euphrasie just asked a question, will we share this presentation? Thanks, Euphrasie. Yes, this presentation will be available to everyone.
Yep. Great. Yeah, so we've got it recorded, so you'll be able to go back, see some things that we're doing. And that's the thing, is we'd like to learn, you know, maybe why you're interested in this topic. You saw this topic of communities of practice and what matters at work, and what was interesting to you. So in this case, let's check in with the whole community instead of just one other person through chat. And when you saw this webinar or this online workshop on communities of practice, on what matters at work, why was it interesting to you? Why did you want to attend this? So just think about this for a minute, and in the chat box, chat over, you know, just like a sentence or two about why this was interesting to you, why this topic, you know, related to communities of practice or what matters at work. You know, you may come in with very little knowledge of it, or you may already have some communities of practice going, who knows? But why is it of interest to you? So just take a minute now to chat over, and we'll check in with the whole group through that. We've got about 37 participants. So just let the group know, hey, here's why I'm interested in this. All right, so I'm seeing some things roll through. All right, thank you, Darren Harris. I've been a part of that community of practice for a long time, the focus on facilitation. Hey, Michelle, I remember we had a little community we formed last summer at CultureCon, seeing some.
Bridget, prioritization. Yeah, how do we focus on the things that are most important at these times? Bridget, glad you're here and hope things are well at WISO.
Thanks, Harry. Nice to see you.
Awesome. There's rolling in. Everybody has a unique reason.
In the virtual world with COPs, yeah. I think that's definitely one of the things we've been thinking about here. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll show you some things you might try. You know, all of a sudden you had a community of practice going where you're meeting maybe in the same room, the same time and place every month, and then all of a sudden that changed. So how do you do that? How do you innovate and do it in a new and different way? Digital transformation, right?
Glad you are here. You have both the Madison and Ottawa connection. Leanna, thank you for being here, and thank you for promoting this to the mediators across the federal government here in Canada.
Great. All right.
Interesting, Danielle. Yeah, you working on COP. Yeah, great. Good.
All right, wonderful. So yeah, keep the chats rolling in with, you know, why you're interested in this. Is helpful for our community to know, right? This is the community's learning from the community here, and helps us to learn what direction we might go to. So maybe I'll advance to the next slide as things are rolling in, Harry, so we can zero in on what are communities of practice.
So communities of practice, just to simplify it a little bit, are groups of people where there is a common concern, interest, or passion for something they do, and they learn how to do it better, interacting regularly. That's just a pragmatic kind of definition for this. The key characteristics of communities of practice need to be understood. The domain, which has to do with our common field of interest and competence. The community and how we build those relationships together, and then the idea of practice. Now, this community building piece is especially important because communities of practice are primarily based on trust-based relationships. So if we're only focused on the content, or we're only focused on one-way information sharing, we miss out on some things that are just really crucial for expanding people's expertise. And then the practice is really important so that we gain confidence and competence together, so that literally the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But simple translation: learn, share, do, learn, share, do. That's how communities of practice roll.
Yeah, all right.
The reasons that you can give for being able to have them can vary from organization to organization. Lots of organizations, companies, agencies view themselves as learning organizations, so it's consistent with that premise. But it's also related to what the underlying interests are of the practitioners in the field, and what they need to advance. So when we ask you in a couple of minutes, what is it that you need to learn now in service to your organization? It's really because you're identifying those needs and interests. The other thing is that giant decentralized bureaucracies, such as governments, need what we call boundary spanning structures. These are ways of organizing ourselves that are different from the traditional hierarchies and the turfs that we tend to stay within. So for example, in Canada, we have various ministries, and we're all contained within these different ministries. Communities of practice, such as the one that Leanna is a part of, span those ministries, and they offer a new structure. And in a very real way, that's how they impact quality and mission. And then the last thing I've listed here, they're going to happen anyway. Yeah, people find ways of moving around the organization to connect with the people that they need to. Communities of practice facilitate that in particularly cost-effective and high-impact ways.
All right.
There are a couple of principles for designing communities of practice so that they're especially effective. These come from one of the scholars in the field, by the way, Etienne Wenger. If you're not familiar with Wenger's work, we'll definitely want to make sure that you get some references here. One that's important is design for evolution. I'll highlight that a little bit more in a moment. Their needs are going to change over time. So we need to think about communities of practice as staying alive in their different phases. Opening dialogue between inside and outside perspectives means that we're not only talking among ourselves, the people who come to the meetings, but we're also engaging community partners so they are able to provide input and participation. Megan, I'll respond to that point and type in Etienne Wenger's name on the chat when we're in a small group breakout. You want to invite different levels of participation, and in that way, people are able to either just come in and watch and see what's going on, or they can take active leadership, or they can move in and out depending on their schedules and their priorities. Lots of different ways of being able to engage in communities of practice, which then involve both public and private kinds of spaces for the community. You want to have both of that. But if you don't provide value, you don't provide a real reason, impact, return on investment for people participating, they have lots of other things to do. So one of the things that's also important is that we have a regular rhythm that creates familiarity, but also that we shake things up. And in that sense, people are not complacent. They like to make sure that they're finding out what's going on. All of these are important. So when you think about your own communities of practice, if you're a member of a mature group, and Darren, let's slide on to the next slide.
Okay. Sounds good.
If we're a member of a mature group that's been around for a while, your needs around aliveness might be different than the needs of a brand new group that's just in the discovery phase, figuring out what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Who are we? And then, and in that sense, you may also find that you've had a group that's matured as a tight group for a while, but then they're now opening themselves up to a whole new group of people. What are some of the challenges there? So there are different phases that exist. You'll see at this slide here, Wenger, McDermott, and Snyder, Cultivating Communities of Practice. That's one of the resources, and that's how you spell Etienne Wenger. But if you Google him, you'll find that he's a great resource with several different writings on this topic. So one other thing that's important is to recognize something that comes from Meg Wheatley and Deborah Fries, which is that communities of practice are just one of the forms that we might take for this kind of learning. And they're well understood in contrast to networks and systems of influence. In networks, individuals come together, they acquire information, they bring it back out, and they take it home. But it's for them as individuals. For communities of practice, there's a sense of community, and as I said earlier, those trust-based relationships. And so what emerges is actually a collective identity that emerges. And in our research on communities of practice, we found that this collective identity is actually something extremely important to people. But they can sometimes be invited to become something else that's called a systems of influence, where those communities of practice actually negotiate with the formal structures of the institution in order to impact policy, program direction, and ultimately members of the community of practice might get involved in the formal development and decision-making around those policies and programs. Okay. You will find as you're moving forward and learning about this, that these distinctions in language can be beneficial to you. Meg Wheatley and Deborah Fries wrote an article about that that's also one that we'll make available to you.
Thanks, Harry.
So we have a story, right, Darren?
Yeah, absolutely.
So UW Maniac is a group that formed about 15 years ago. And if you notice this picture in the back of the picture, you'll actually see Darren and me both there. That's how we met. And it was the Madison Area Network for Innovation and Collaboration. And over a period of a decade or so, UW Maniac was very beneficial in supporting people moving from a creative spark, whatever their field, into a value-based innovation. And it was people at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but also people throughout the community, and actually over time, other places and in other locations. But people learned tools, shared stories, and brought back tangible approaches to solve real problems. And they practiced those kinds of things together within the safe space of UW Maniac workshops, but then they were able to also report whatever their learning was back in their home bases.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's how, I think the outcomes of communities of practice speak for themselves. Here, Harry and I are, over 10 years later, just like, what's the next thing? When is the next big thing that, we might be able to learn together or to do or to practice together? And it's, we just came up with this idea for putting on this together a couple of weeks ago and are launching it, kind of prototyping it. So for me, it's had long lasting effect being a part of a community of practice. Yeah. All right. All right, so now let's get into like trying to do some of this stuff, and how do we do it remotely, right? Maybe that's a big challenge that a lot of people have felt lately, is how do you do a community of practice remotely? So I'd like to introduce to you maybe a couple of different new tools and techniques. The first I just chatted over into the chat. So if you're on your computer, click on that link. It's app.mural.co and then a bunch of other text, right? But that will be a link to get into this online whiteboard. That's a collaborative whiteboard that we can all get on together and kind of play around with that. And I'll show you a little bit about how to use that. And we'll get into some breakout groups around that too. So let me quickly just open up my Mural board, as they call it. So if you click on that link, you'll notice you'll come in as an anonymous animal. I see anonymous rhino already in there getting at it a little bit, right?
Yeah,
so
goats and pandas and fish. Great, excellent. Seahorse.
Yep, so it's fun. So it's like, here's a digital space where we can see us in there. So what you'll notice, the first thing is I'm IT, innovation training, is that this is like a Google map where you can zoom in and zoom out just like you would on a Google map, right? By like pinching your mouse, right? So if you see the US, you can zoom in on Wisconsin, you can zoom in on Madison, you can zoom in on your street, right? So by zooming in and zooming out, you can see what's on the whole board, right? So that's one way that it works. And you can grab stuff, you can move it around, anything like that. But the first thing I'd like for you to do is to try to find in the upper left-hand corner, the first activity, where it's that question that we just posed, what's something now that people really need to learn in your organization? So make a mess with this and grab a Post-it note and double click on it to be able to see the cursor and start to add text. For, what's something that you'd like to learn now in your organization? What do people need to learn now? So don't worry about making a mess, right? Grabbing stuff, moving around, I'll move it back. I see people already double clicking on the note, adding some things, but just it could be a number of things. In this era, I've had to learn, how do I go from, facilitating on-site workshops that are usually global that people fly into, to having a whole new kind of business that's remote and digital first, right? How do you facilitate remotely? How do you have VUCA leadership, in a world that's volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous? Any of that?
Yeah, and along those lines, how do we keep focused on the things that our organizations have set are priorities when we're personally feeling that some of those priorities are just receding into the past? Or how do we deal with things that we're now recognizing are important, but there doesn't seem to be any will towards getting them to happen?
Absolutely. So these are just some things that are coming to mind for us. So go ahead and click a yellow Post-it note now and add it on there. And the nice thing is I can move stuff around too, of other people's, so I'll be cleaning up this board. So this is like a chance that I think a community of practice helps with, is let's introduce you to something you probably have maybe even never heard of before. and much less have even done. So this is our chance, like in that kind of safe environment, to let's see something new, let's click on stuff, let's add stuff, and let's see that we're kind of a group that's here together, an anonymous shrimp and rabbit and giraffe and duck and goat and owl and that kind of thing. So that's our first activity to kind of play around with this mural, because I think this will be something that is growing in popularity quite a bit. And you can always undo what you did. If you go to the top, there's an undo kind of arrow that helps sometimes. You can follow me, right, where I might be showing stuff. Anonymous Lion is doing that. And if you just double click, you'll add your own Post-it note, right, on a space, and then double click on that to add text. So this is something that we can all do at the same time. It gives us a little bit of a physical space when we can't be there together, we'll say, but in a digital realm. So as you're kind of playing with that, adding, things that you're thinking about for, things that are needed to learn now in your organization, I'll also go to the next level, and we'll try to get you into some breakout groups where, okay, this is the first thing that might help people get together in a space. But the nice thing is now Zoom has breakout groups, right? They've had them for a little bit of time now, but it is a pretty powerful approach to get people together into a space together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign some breakout groups where we've got about maybe 37, 36 people on right now. And I'm going to create breakout rooms where you'll go into a room with maybe 3 other people. So there might be about 4. So it'll be just like this. So make sure you turn your camera on and unmute yourself if you're muted. But you'll get into this room to be able to have this conversation about this question right here. What's something now that people really need to learn in your organization, right? It's probably different than it was 6 months ago, but what has emerged now that you see as a big learning need in your organization? And to just be able to have a conversation about that. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms, and you'll get randomly assigned, and you'll go in there, and then there'll be a timer that will happen. And then you'll know when there's maybe about a minute left. So you'll go in there automatically, you'll form a breakout group, and you'll be notified when there's maybe about a minute left, right?
It's about a 10-minute conversation in total, right, Darren?
Yep, so we'll do a 10-minute conversation total. So the room's going to close in 10 minutes, right? And we're just going to kind of figure this out as you go. That's kind of our theme for this, as we're practicing here today, right? So that's what we'll give it a go. So I'm going to open all the rooms now. And you should be in there with maybe a pair, maybe 3, maybe 4 people. But you should be going into the rooms.
I'm looking on that yellow board there. There's a lot of good stuff up there.
Here we go. All right, we're welcoming people back now. So it was almost like a conference where
I kicked myself out. I was like, what happened? Why am I back in this space?
we could go to a breakout room, and I'll come on back, but that's part of the thing, is I can get everybody back as we'll say the engineer of this thing. So that's a breakout room feature at Zoom. It can get a little messy at times, because sometimes there's 4 people in a room, sometimes there's a pair in a room, and you just got to kind of deal with that ambiguity, which is one of my big learning outcomes for this era, is how do you get started when it's a mess, right? How do you figure out your way through a mess? And that's almost all the stuff that I'm doing here today is, let's try this mural for the first time. Let's try this Zoom breakout room for the first time. So I'm seeing people back on the Mural board. So usually this is something that works well if you have a computer, right? And you open it up into another tab, versus if you're on a phone or you're using the iPad. It's better to do this when you can open up another tab. So yeah, go ahead and, if there was a learning need that popped up, try adding it to a Post-it note here in this yellow space. I've been trying to clean it up a little bit, but our goal is to make a mess. So that was the first kind of activity, was, okay, let's try a Zoom breakout room to almost have a mini community of practice here. And this is just, it's called Mural, is what it is. So I'm using Chrome. So that's something you might learn as you're trying to figure this out, what works best for this. But there's a lot of these tools out there. This one's called Mural. Another one sounds very similar, Miro, M-I-R-O. Then there's another one called, I think, like Concept Board, maybe Storm Board, Jam Board, but they're collaborative whiteboards where everybody can get on the same time. You can do a lot of interesting things. We're just touching the surface here today. But next we have another kind of activity where in communities of practice, a lot of times we do an experience and then we want to reflect on it, right? So what we'll do now is get you into maybe a smaller group, maybe this time pairs with a different person. And the purpose of this is to reflect on that first conversation that you have. What did you learn from others? What did you notice? And maybe to get you warmed up, maybe move over to the mural board where it's activity 2, the green cards that you'll see here with what are your reflections from your conversation. So based on that conversation, you know, what did you notice? You know, were there some themes that you noticed when you look at the learning needs or you heard them? If you were to double click on a card and add the theme, you know, what would be a theme for the learning needs that you're seeing, or what are your reflections, right? So I see people starting to look at those, click on those, pop on those. Remember, you double click on a card to add text to it. You should see a cursor pop up. That's what I look for, is the cursor. There we go, anonymous goat moving stuff around. So for me, the mural whiteboard is just kind of an added thing. It's like you're in a physical room, right? And you might be at that table. That's almost like what we did, is we broke the group up into tables where there might have been 4 at a table, 3 at a table, maybe 2, right? And how do you then maybe use a whiteboard as a part of that? But knowing the main purpose here is the conversation you're having with the people. So as you're typing things down, we're seeing new mindsets. We're seeing practice staying in the learning mode, right? So this is something that's extra, and that's a key thing, is what is the technology?
Can I ask you a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
can I how do you get in this? Like, I do touch the screen, like I get nothing, no response. How do I add a comment? Like, do I need to download this application first? That doesn't work at all on my end. And I see from the chat there's many people that don't get how this is working.
Yep. So it's going to work if you're on your computer versus a iPad or a phone. And it's just opening it up in another browser tab, right? And I'm using Chrome as my browser.
Okay.
So that's how it's working for me, and it looks like it's working for some other people. But if you maybe are going from a phone, I think they have an application that you download. So this is just one consideration to make. And I saw somebody made that thing of like, what's the tech kind of situation? You know, are people coming in on their phones? If so, then this isn't the thing that you'll be able to use. But I use this usually with smaller groups. When I know everybody, okay, you're going to be on your computer, we're going to open it up. I may give them a little training on it first through a video. So that's how I might use it. But in this case, it's just like, let's see if we can use it. Let's mess around. And I'll have the link up there where you'll be able to get into it a little bit later. But now, Harry, let's go into the other breakout. Harry, anything to add here?
I think this is a chance to be able to reflect with someone else about what it is that you got from that previous round of conversation.
Yep. So here we're gonna recreate rooms now, and this time you might be in with a pair, right? With this one, that's kind of our goal here. But we'll see how it goes, and we'll recreate these rooms. And
this is a quick reflection.
This is just like a 3-minute long pair up with this one, right? So we'll do 3 minutes, and then you'll get notified again, and we'll just pair it up and see how it goes. So you should be going into your rooms automatically now. All right. So as people are coming on back, welcome back, and we'll did a couple of rounds of breakouts there. It's always the theme I'm hearing. It's a technology theme, and just all kinds of differences with that. And that's what a community of practice, I think, is good for. Is like, let's make a mess together. Let's see what this is, how it might work, how it might not work. What are new ideas, new ways of doing things digitally? And that's what we almost need the courage to do, is to just fail again. So a lot of stuff here may work for some, may not work for others, but that's kind of what we're trying to do as a community here. So Harry, maybe I will give you access to show your slides again. Okay. Take us to the next part. So let me see if I can make you the host. So we'll change host.
Yep. And I've got somebody in the waiting room.
Yep. So you can just admit them if you see that. Yep.
Yep.
Then you can share your slides again through the screen share.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. And go back to where we are. Yes. So one of the things that I've been focused on over the last couple of years has been a project I've called What Matters at Work. And it has culminated in a book that came out in January, a blog that I now try to update every week, and a community of practice from the first two cohorts of the course as it's been expressed. And what I have been trying to do is come up with a way of expressing the things that I've learned over time regarding how we can align our values, intentions, resources, and actions all in service to what matters. And the book's organized in 6 different sections. One that I think is just extremely important is about preparation. How do we prepare ourselves? How do we become attuned to our own values and intentions and allow us to then notice the things that matter? Then with that awareness, how do we survey the terrain of our organization, of our institution, and its various decision-making structures, communication structures, hierarchies and bureaucracies in order to find places where we may leverage greatest influence? How do we explore the pathways and practices of those who came before us so that we can learn best practices, learn from their wisdom? And some of that wisdom comes within our field, but some of it comes from other fields. And I try to bring together a number of different kinds of learnings that I've had over the years then to help us act in these ways. There's another piece which relates to nourishing ourselves and the others on the journey. So as we're going about this learning, how do we sustain ourselves? How do we sustain one another so that it isn't falling into the trap that typically arises in many well-intentioned endeavors where people just get burned out? And then the 5th area, how do you launch the journey? How do you just get started? Very often people feel overwhelmed. There's just so much to be able to do and so many different places potentially to start. So how do you launch? So I provide some guidance in that regard. And then finally, how do we learn together to deepen capacity? And that's where communities of practice really fall in for me. Being able to have ongoing, sustained ways of learning together so that as individuals we're nourished, but also we're bringing back to our organizations the things that we're picking up. Again, and frankly, in this webinar, my hope is that you not only take it back for yourself, but that you think about ways that you can connect with others within your organization or within your field to be able to say, these were some questions that were sparked. How can we learn about this and find answers together more deeply? So to give us a taste of how these areas might intersect with the work that a community of practice might do, we've identified 3 activities that come out of what matters at work. One is about telling your core story. Second is reflecting on the ways we use time. And the third is managing transitions. We'll be asking you to go into breakouts in a couple of moments. And when we do that, you'll have a chance to take one of these activities, whichever one you like, as a way to be able to focus in on this question. In what ways might you offer leadership, even in a small way, in service to what matters? And if you can, what might be next steps? So that will be the core question. We'll have that up on Mural as well as the slides that I'll show you in a moment as ways of reminding you these are the ways of thinking about it that we've come up with. This first possible pathway in is about a core story, one that reflects your values and passion. What is your why? What is the real calling that you have that gives you a great cause that you believe in? So if you're involved in community building, what is it about that experience that really drives you, that is the core thing, that is the essence of your belief, that causes you to do this work? How? What's the process? Specific actions that you take or contemplate taking? And then what's the result? What's the result of these actions so that you're able to see through telling this story, this is who I am, this is what matters to me, and this is the contribution that I've been able to make. So one way in might be through such a story. A second way in is about thinking on how we use time. Might seem like an odd question. We do the stuff we're supposed to do, we have our to-do lists, we go to the meetings we're required to go to, etc. I've organized my thinking about time into a few categories, and they work for me. I hope, might be helpful for you. One is reflection. How much time are we using, or are we actually taking time to reflect on the things that matter to us, to sort out the priorities that we have? Or are we just getting going and diving into things willy-nilly, or in response to whatever shows up in the inbox? Connecting. To what degree are we making, in this virtual, self-isolated time, connections with other people who have resources that we need, wisdom that can instruct us, energy, skills, knowledge, position power? Are we making those connections, and are we using those connections in a way that's in service to the things that matter? Producing. Producing might be final reports, but it might also be, just like in this webinar, prototyping new ideas, being able to check them out, see how they work, getting dirty with them. To what degree am I doing that? Or am I simply dotting the I's, crossing the T's, doing the things that are required? And the fourth one I think is real important, synthesizing. To what degree are we taking the time to breathe in, understand this is what's actually happening? What is the meaning? Can we connect the dots among these different pieces? And then how does each way of using time offer value here? So that's a second activity that you might choose. The third is one that's probably self-evident. We're going through a period of significant change around us, and we can notice that. Yes, our offices might be closed. The trip to the supermarket is filled with stress. We no longer can do some of the activities like connecting with our kids, and in my case, grandkids as well. Those things are difficult. So what is being lost? What is ending? And what is it that we need to let go of? But also, how are we navigating this neutral zone? William Bridges has a great way of being able to describe it. It's not just about the change around us, but the transition that's affecting us internally. So what are we experiencing that we're letting go of or ending? What's the neutral zone that we're now trying to navigate and stay relatively safe and stable on? And then what are some new things that are beginning that may not have occurred to us or may not have seemed viable? For example, a number of us are involved in teletherapy at this point. If we're doing that, that might be really different from the way we were approaching it just 10 weeks ago. So in this next activity, you have a choice as we break into the small groups to decide which one of these ways of discussing your potential opportunity for contributing leadership is a way of being able to describe it. Darren?
All right, thank you, Harry. Let's do this. I'm going to reclaim my hostship from you here. And so now I've chatted over a couple of things. The breakout question, when you get into your breakout groups, is in what ways might you offer leadership, even in a small way, in service to what matters? So it's almost like if you were going to maybe make a difference at your organization with what matters, or you're maybe even going to start up a community of practice. How might you do that? What might be the topic, you know? And maybe using one of these models like the Simon Sinek why, how, what model, or the transition model, or the use of time model. How might you do it? So it's almost just a time to get in a breakout and think about, hey, here's how I might, you know, move community practice forward or provide a little leadership share in it somehow in my organization around what matters at work. So what we're going to do is create some more breakout groups here where maybe you'll get into maybe another group of, ideally I'm shooting for triads here with this one, but you might be with a pair or you might be with 4. Who knows how that goes. It automatically assigns. But then this one, Harry, for 10 minutes, we're thinking, for a final kind of activity here. Or let's go 9 minutes for this one. All right, so what I'll do is I'll open the rooms now. You should have new partners, and you'll join those rooms.
Yep, thank you.
All right, Harry, what are your, where do we go from here, Harry?
So I think you've got the last couple of slides sitting up on the screen there, but one of the things that I want to make sure to do is just express appreciation to people for being so forthcoming and being able to dive in. And I realized too that one of the challenges is that the contexts in which we work are really different, and being able to understand those contexts in a very brief amount of time is challenging. And yet I'm finding that people, at least in my own interactions, are doing that. So that's something I'm grateful for, and it's striking to me. So as we come to closure here, we're going to, first of all, I think we want to call to people's attention the purple slips over on the whiteboard.
Go the other way. Yep.
There we go. So and the question there that we would appreciate being able to have people share in these last few minutes is, what are your insights as a result of this session? And if you have an insight that you'd like to share, this is a way to do it. Of course, you can do it on chat as well. So you don't only need to use the purple slips here, but this is something we want to invite you to do. So that's there for all of us as we go to the final insights that we want to share.
Yeah, I just liked the 10,000-foot view on the mural board, where I can see the cards laid out almost like they're on the table, and then see the themes are organized from there. But in this case, chat works great too. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. It's like, how do we get, help you to reflect and the big picture insight and chat it over or put it on a card or whatever it might be. Just a couple of different ways of doing it.
Yeah. So there's a way of being able to think about communities of practice that Etienne Wenger has described, that my friend Catherine Loving and I have discussed in workshops that we've done about communities of practice. So I took this slide from stuff that Catherine and I have done together. And it's this idea that a community of practice is like a park. And if you look at this lovely park, you'll see it has different components. It has big green spaces, it has smaller, more intimate spaces, it has spaces that you might play in, may have playground structures, etc. Well, some people are going to come into the park and they're going to actively use the playground structures, like the mural board. Other people are going to want to just stay with their own group and be able to figure out a problem that needs to be solved in their own group. And so they might have a space that allows them to do that. But they're still part of the park, and they're still able to listen in on the things that are happening in other areas. Some people are going to want to be really active in organizing events and programs and learning opportunities, and still other people are going to want to just read the notes and the minutes. All of these are ways that people might get engaged. But whoever we are, if we're trying to make a case to our organization that communities of practice should be part of our learning approach, one thing is we've got to be able to make a case both for the organization and the individual. It's not just, I'm going to this meeting, I'm finding it beneficial, but we need to be able to make a case for how my learning is going to enrich the organization. It may require that there's some sharing that goes on in the organization of things that happen in the public spaces of the community of practice. That's fine. It doesn't take anything away from the private spaces and the safety of those spaces. Secondly, you need to balance organic emergence of agendas and topics and ways of doing things with things that are acknowledged through an agenda or some kind of priority planning are the institution's direction. We frequently find ourselves, especially in top-down organizations, really having a whole lot of pressure to respond to that institutional direction. Communities of practice are much more organic. And those of you who are experienced with these understand exactly what I'm meaning and as to why those are important for their sustaining. And then the third piece is about the need for a strong leadership role. I'm actually seeing people in this group today who've provided such strong leadership in different communities of practice that I'm aware of. Leanna, Rich, Sarah, Steve, Darren. There are different people who I know have been doing this. And as they're doing it, we need to make sure that we're taking the time and setting it aside for the investment in that leadership so it can naturally occur.
Great. All right, here, I'll zoom in here. So you can also present on Mural too, right? Almost throw your slides up there and go through and have the white space. And so that's another value of it, I guess. So I guess I know we said 11:15 Central Time would be our closing time. So I just wanted to thank everybody, especially thank Harry. This is kind of Harry's topic, as you could tell. Communities of practice merged with his other big area, What Matters at Work, and just a wonderful book that Harry wrote that grabbed that right away on the Kindle. And I like it, just a lot of activities. It's almost like if you were to get your own community of practice going in your own organization, there are just so many good activities in that book that you could do during your sessions together to zero in on what matters at work. So I think Harry could help you out if that's something you're looking at doing, whether it's, just the book and the materials or, some deeper help with him, to get these things going in your organization and make them thrive. And can tell he's just a great source of wisdom for this, not only in the research he's done, but the practice of it too. Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know Darren and the Innovation Learning site, you should definitely check it out. I know I spoke with a couple people who are really involved in interest around creativity. And in that regard, it's something that that's his wheelhouse. So definitely want to invite him to speak with people about that.
All right. Thank you, Harry.
Any final questions? That I know that people have been putting some things up on the chat here, and I'm glad to be able to respond. One thing I should just mention is that the book is $21.95 US. So I think that is probably about 28, 29 Canadian.
Great. So yeah, thanks so much, Harry. Thanks everybody for contributing to the community today. We're in prototype mode today. We're like, let's do a bunch of stuff we've never done before, never even heard of, don't know if you even have the technology to do, but that's kind of the approach that I like during an era like this, is how do we just make a mess and make a mess together with people that are going to support us and be game for it. And I think that's how we really grow in this area, where we're called to learn and do things in new ways. We've got to be willing to fail a bunch, and to do it with a group, a community. Right. So that's my final takeaway, I guess, Harry.
And I do want to reiterate, because I saw this question as a couple people had come in a little later. Yes, this presentation is recorded, so it's available, and then the slides are available. And of course, anybody who separately needs the slides, just send me an email, and I'm glad to send them over to you. Okay.
Yeah, I'll send a message to the registrants with some resources that we've got, like access to the recording or some of these things. I'll even keep like this mural up so you can go back into it and take a look at it and mess around with it and play around with it like it's your sandbox too. So we'll get to that and keep you updated. Great. All right. Thanks for the chats, everybody. I appreciate.
Thanks, everybody.
You prototyping with us.
Be well.
Today.
Stay safe and be well.
All right. Bye-bye. Zoom high fives to everybody. Brady Bunch style. All right.